So the Lakers will lose because Rajon Rondo broke his thumb? That sounds ridiculous. I mean, this isn't 24-year-old playoff Rondo. This is 34-year-old Rondo. Rondo is so old and slow now, he's living up to his turtle nickname.
Is it me or does Rajon Rondo look like that turtle named Franklin or Nick Jr.?
No, I'm kidding. That's too harsh. The Lakers won't lose because of Rondo's injury. They were losing anyway. Rondo being out for about 8 weeks just makes their issues even more obvious. In this video, we'll explain why the Lakers were gonna lose anyway and who's to blame. At the end, we'll talk about what the Lakers will probably do to make up for this latest loss. Hey, it's Casey. Welcome to another week of AM Hoops. 5 videos per week, dropping at 5 Eastern. We are so psyched for these games to be back. Hit subscribe and notification bells because it really helps out the channel. But I want to thank our Patreon subscribers because this channel is starting to become sustainable, which is awesome, and you guys are a big reason why. All right, so back to the Lakers and Rondo. It is ridiculous for Laker fans to be upset that Rondo is hurt. I mean, they've been complaining about this guy all year. Their worst player on defense. His stats are awful. Now that he's out, you can't suddenly cry about it. Yes, his stats do suck, but it's not Rondo's fault. It's what's wrong with the Lakers in general. But those stats are pretty bad. I mean, the Lakers offense just isn't good in Rondo's hands. They outscore opponents by just about 1 point per 100 possessions with Rondo on the floor. That is the worst among Lakers who have spent the entire year on the roster. When he goes to the bench, that number goes up to about 10 points per 100 possessions, the highest total of any full-time Laker. Bottom line, without Rondo, they have been the number 4 offense in the league. With Rondo, the 22nd. So losing Rondo should actually be a good thing because statistically, he is the worst Laker. Well, this is where stats can be misleading because Rondo is the only other true point guard besides Alex Caruso. So Rondo runs the team when LeBron James sits, and surprise, surprise, the Lakers aren't very good without LeBron. Bottom line, this isn't a Rondo problem. This is a Laker problem. The team chose to ignore not having a secondary playmaker on their roster. They chose to go with Rajon Rondo, and now they're screwed. Yes, the front office did try to get Darren Collison, but after that failed, what then? They've added Markieff Morris, Dion Waiters, J.R. Smith. What is that? They've known all year their biggest issue was not having another ball handler and someone to run the offense when LeBron sits, and now Rob Pelinka's mistake will ruin their season. At the trade deadline, they chose not to trade for a backup point guard. That package would have centered around Kyle Kuzma, but they didn't want to give him up. What? We have no idea what Kuzma is going to look like in the playoffs. Backup point guards on bad teams were available too. I mean, they could have gone really hard for Derrick Rose. You're telling me Jeff Teague wasn't available? They tried to trade for Dennis Schroeder but weren't willing to pay the price. Why not? Schroeder would be perfect to run the offense when LeBron is resting. But no, the Lakers stood pat because LeBron James covers up all their issues. And this isn't a surprise. Any Laker fan out there knows this issue has stared them in the face all year. The team hasn't been good when LeBron James sits. They need someone who can at least be average, keep them afloat when LeBron James has to take at least a few minutes off. He is 35 years old. Instead, Rob Pelinka did not act, and this is on him. Actually, you could say this is on LeBron James because he covers up all the issues. I mean, he's so good, it could be a blessing or a curse. In this case, a curse. Too many times this year, the bench unit, led by Rondo, blew leads, and then LeBron and AD had to come back in and save the day. And the Lakers' regular season record was so good that, hey, no problem, right? Wrong. The inexperienced Lakers front office just pretended like this was an issue that they could live with. They acted like not having someone to run their offense when LeBron wasn't on the court wasn't a big deal because they won a lot of regular season games. Look, I'm not a believer in depth winning playoff series, but it will be different in the bubble. There will be a higher rate of injury and there will be more games played in less time. So yes, depth will be a factor. Speaking of depth, just how much have they lost here? Well, the Lakers lost 45 minutes of depth between Rondo and Avery Bradley. That means It is the Caruso, baby. Seriously, Alex Caruso's clothing line is gonna sell out by the time this thing's over. As soon as Avery Bradley went down, I knew the bald eagle was getting a lot more minutes. I mean, their options are terrible. Of the non-starters, there's Quinn Cook, Dion Waiters, J.R. Smith, Alex Caruso. Caruso is clearly their best defensive option here, but he'll have to play Rondo's role too. And that means this will be a career-defining 2 months for everyone's favorite balding 26-year-old. Lakers fans have been calling for Caruso to get more minutes all season. Oh, you're gonna get it whether you like it or not. They're gonna have to depend on Caruso in big playoff moments. If he comes through for LeBron James in the playoffs, dude is set for life. He will always be that experienced role player who could be a winner in the playoffs. Those kinds of guys play forever, like Andre Miller back in the day, George Hill, or Rajon Rondo now. But if Caruso cannot handle this role, he will fade away and LeBron won't win that 4th ring. Realistically, the Lakers will probably end up playing LeBron 40+ minutes per game in the playoffs. And I am so nervous about what that means for a 35-year-old coming off a 4-month break. Even though he plays at a high level, age is catching up to him. I mean, LeBron just had his first major injury last season. Age had a lot to do with that. The Lakers are gonna need LeBron to play an insane amount of minutes, especially now with Rondo out, and the chances of his season ending early go way up. I'm actually starting to feel bad for LeBron James here. I mean, if any team is all in for the playoffs, it's the LA Lakers. Now, because the Lakers front office refused to get a secondary playmaker, LeBron's chances at another title are slim. Beyond AD and LeBron, this team is average at best. Now, some of you are gonna point to Mario Chalmers putting on social media that he's ready to step up. Chalmers did win 2 championships with LeBron James in Miami, but besides the fact that he's 34 years old and he tore his Achilles in 2016, this ain't gonna happen. The Lakers are not eligible to sign a replacement player for Rondo, so forget it. However, there is the wild card of Dion Waiters and J.R. Smith. I know a lot of people are saying that they will play a big role in the playoffs. First off, neither guy is really a playmaker, so they're not going to fill in for Rondo. I mean, Dion Waiters is a little more than JR, but they're both streaky shooters. Secondly, I don't trust either of these guys in a big playoff moment. Let's recap. Dion Waiters was on the Thunder in 2016. OKC should have lost to the Spurs because of him. He elbows Manu Ginobili here on an inbounds pass. Lucky that wasn't called. Then he throws the ball away. Lucky the Spurs couldn't score. J.R. Smith, though, of course, will always be remembered for the dumbest play in NBA history. The Cavaliers should have upset the Warriors Game 1 in 2018. Game tied, seconds ticking down. J.R. Smith has no idea what's going on. He gets the offensive board, dribbles it out instead of trying to win the game. When Dion wasn't eating weed gummies this year, he played in just 3 games. J.R. hasn't played in 20 months. I predicted early on that these guys would get close to 0 minutes between them for the Lakers. Frank Vogel just said in the bubble they will lean mostly on Dion Waiters, and he sounds so thrilled.
But I also like the prospects of seeing what Dion Waiters can do, and we've got 2 really good basketball players that we added late in our season that do different things. Losing Rondo puts more of a need on Dion's skill set. So, I look forward to seeing what he can do more as we get into games. But all of those guys will pick up the slack.
Yes, Coach Vogel did sound so excited there because really neither guy is dependable in the playoffs at this point. But we will see what Dion still has apparently, and there is a chance he makes a difference. Waiters is just 28 years old, so technically he's still in his prime. He played over half his minutes last year at point guard for the Miami Heat. He's used to coming off the bench, and he's played more recently. In fact, he actually scored 14 points off the bench against the Clippers in January. Still, in the biggest playoff moments, Dion Waiters isn't good enough to rely on. I think it'll come down to LeBron and more LeBron when it matters most. Bottom line, the front office totally messed up when they didn't sign or trade for a legit secondary playmaker when they had the chance. They've known this was an issue all along. They'll probably use the Rondo injury as an excuse for when they lose, but this is absolutely Rob Pelinka's fault. Support AM Hoops and click subscribe. Don't miss a daily NBA video.